Well, you know, on what the movie runs. No, that's exactly right. No, you better hold that up. Okay.
Good afternoon. And we got a rowdy crowd today. Look at this. Welcome. We're happy to have all of you here on a Friday afternoon. It's a little bit of a slightly blustery day here in Scottsdale. We've had a little bit of rain on and off and wind, but we are happy to be here and happy to have all of you with us. So thank you very much. And thank you for those who might be joining us online. Today's topic is drawing from experience. So I got to thinking we hadn't really done a panel that kind of focused on drawing and how it's really the foundation of all fine art. Trevor's waving frantically. We have a table right here for you. Yes,
That's what put you on that side.
he needs to be kept in line.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So, yeah, well, yeah, Kathy looks kind of innocent, but it's going to be a lively panel today. I promise you that. So, from your left, we have Trevor Swanson right here from Phoenix, Arizona. Yes. And Kathy Sheeter from the beautiful state of Colorado. And right next to me is Kurt Matson from Cave Creek, Arizona. So, we assembled some of our finest artists that really focus on the art of drawing and the line work involved in that. And you'll see we've got, Trevor's results in painting, Kathy results in the scratch board. Kurt Matson does, what are you, quadruple threat? Or
Hopefully more than one.
you're like Steph. There's like, you paint, you sculpt, you etch, you draw, you paint watercolor, pen and ink. So it's going to be fun. So I hope we can all learn something today. So Trevor, will you start, just give a little bit of background about you and how you came to be an artist?
Yes. So I come from a family of artists. My great grandfather was a painter. He was also a farmer in South Dakota. So during the winter months, he would be cooped up inside and would paint. It's a study that he kind of Dutch and Italian masters. But so using some finer oils, finer brushes, creating a lot of detail. But it was just this, great way for him to spend the winters and farm during the summer. Skipped a generation, and my uncle picked it up. My dad, he taught my dad and taught a cousin, and then taught me when I was ready. So it's this really interesting kind of intergenerational feel of painting and love and our love of color and what we see around us. And that's what brought me to the art world, is having a family business more than anything.
Did you always have a pencil in your hand when you were a kid?
Yeah, always. I would have done a lot better in school if I had not been drawing. My mom saved a bunch of different notes and was one of those, hey, this is a great flower, but let's work on algebra. It was just, I was the guy to go to, hey, can you draw me? And later on, hey, can you draw me in the car? Just one of those things that was always there, not realizing that I was, had that. It was just natural.
I'm all wound up. So I also come from a fairly artistic family, though not professional artists like Trevor's family. My dad was a woodworker and my mom enjoyed dabbling in painting, and the two of them together would carve decoys, and my dad would do the carvings and my mom would do the paintings. And I remember as a child being like, wow, that's so cool. It looks like a real duck. And watching things go from this essentially wooden block into turning out to be a cool decoy. And so I was fortunate to have a family that encouraged me, though that was not their professions. And my brother was also, I have a brother who's 2.5 years older, and he was actually the more naturally talented artist of the two of us, but I like to say I was the one with more perseverance. So he works in a computer industry and I ended up doing the art full time, but it's been a fun ride. I work in a non-traditional medium that I was introduced to originally in a high school art class in a public school. So some of you that have children, grandchildren, or may remember doing it yourself, it was just black and white scratch board in school. And animals have always been my passion. And even those ones that I did in school on kind of the cardboard, cheapo scratch board, I thought, oh, this is a really cool technique for rendering animal fur because it's a very repeatable line quality that looks a lot like fur. And really got hooked on it, and then went off to college and was a poor starving college student. My college degree was nothing to do with drawing, but I had an animal science degree, so the animals carried through, and did lots of pencil drawings for various other students and instructors for $50, in college. And a few of my college instructors still have their $50 pet portraits that I did. And after college, came back and picked up my first professional grade scratch boards and went, wow, the line quality is just amazing with this medium. And the drawing skills that I developed as a pencil artist really transferred beautifully over to the scratch board, and color came into my work later on, but that was how I got started with scratch board.
So instead of applying color, you're subtracting color or subtracting the black. And then the categorization for scratchboard, is that technically drawing or mixed media, or what would it be?
So that gets a little bit of a shade of gray, kind of depends like on the particular show. So certainly black and white scratch boards like the mountain lion behind me it's exclusively a drawing. While I'm working by removing the surface layer, it's all value-based, which is essentially what drawing is. Now, many of my works have incorporated now color, and color is an additional step that's done over the black and white scratching. And in some cases, some venues consider it mixed media. I still consider it a drawing form because it's still, the foundation is all drawing. But it kind of depends on the specific show about where they like to categorize it as.
That's good to know. And then Kurt, I love, Kurt is always doing something, and we're gonna see some of his little sketches later on, but tell us a little bit about how you got into art.
Well, it was basically what it boils down to is I was running a ranch. I worked ranches in California, but it was my background. I tell everybody, I don't know much, but I know horses and I know cowboying. And so it's a matter of taking that and really starting to apply it. And here's what happened. We went to the World Championships in Oklahoma City. We used to show cutters and reiners. So we went back there. This is 1979. And I walked into the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and what I saw was two things. The End of the Trail by James Earl Frazier, which is 18 feet tall. And I was like, oh, good grief, that horse was just so cool. And then they had a ink drawing by Edward Boreen. And Boreen was an old California like me. He grew up in my traditions. And this guy could draw. He got known for etchings and watercolors. And when he had this old vaquero with these eagle bill taps and a 60-foot rayetta, and he's kicking it out after these old numbers, it was so good, spade bits and all the rest. And by 1983, I was running a ranch in Northern California. It was either stay in the horse business or try this art thing. And most horse trainers end up broken and broke. And I figured in the art business, I might be broke, but I won't be busted up so I can stay horseback. So we decided I took off on that journey, and that's where it all started, was this idea of telling the stories of the West. Most people will never have the experience of stepping on a horse and going into no country at all, nothing out there, and you're pushing cows. or put an old horse on a cow and train him up on a spade bit, all these different things. And be able to share that is just, it's part of our culture as Americans, and it's really great. So there you go.
Okay, so have you always incorporated drawing? Because you first came into the show featuring sculpture.
Yeah.
But have you always had drawing as a foundation?
No, I'll tell you what happened to me. And this was, Colleen, I've been in the show 23 years. This was probably 5 years or 4 years in. And I'll never forget this. And here again, I was still, working my way around, but there was a guy and somebody asked him, why are you a sculptor? And he said, because I can't draw. And I thought, that's like me. And, so what I did is I went and I got a pad of paper and I started drawing all the time. And if you know anything about Edward Boreen, what Boreen would do, and you'll still find these little sketches, he would sit at night and he would just draw page after page after page of these sketches. And what happens with Boreen, what happens with Charlie Russell in particular, when you see their horses and you see their characters, they tell you what they found important by how they draw them. And that's why when you look across the room, you can tell it's a Charlie Russell. Color is a part of it. A part of it is those horses look like a Russell horse. Boreens always look like that's a Boreen, and you can tell it because they're accentuating and taking away what they find important. That's what gives you a voice. So I started drawing, and my drawings in the beginning were so good it made grown men weep. They would look at them and just cry. But eventually you get better at it. And it's a matter, and believe me, it's like, I'm a very slow learner, but it's such a good exercise. And it's important to learn those basics and to know how to do that, whether you're a sculptor, whether you're a painter, no matter what, because it's truly the foundation of everything. And I think about it this way. In the Bible, the first thing we know about God is that he's a creator. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then if you go to Proverbs chapter 8, verse 27, listen to what it says here. It says, when he, speaking of the Lord, established the heaven, when he drew a circle on the face of the deep. So you've got a picture here of what creation is about and the character of God. And part of that is this idea of drawing. That's how foundational it is. So we need to know it and we need to understand it. And when you start to get a fire for it, it's like, oh, great, you see so many things. And that's part of developing your maturity in terms of art, is really being able to appreciate a good drawing.
Awesome. You should be a little bit more enthusiastic.
Well, I know, I got to not talk so.
No, I love it. I love it. And I love Kurt is always curious. Well, all of you are, you stay curious, and that's part of what makes you such creators. I love that. And yes, communication has the foundation has started in drawing, and the cavemen communicated with what?
The original scratch board.
The original scratch board, cave drawings. We have petroglyphs. So it's a foundational communication form. And so Trevor, you do a lot of work inspiring others so they could draw.
Yes.
If they put their mind to it.
And it is a part of me. I come from a whole background of teachers as well as artists. Lots of my in-laws, lots of my people, two of my favorite people are teachers, my daughter, my sister-in-law. And one of the things that throughout all this, at the art career was going to schools and talking to a lot of kids, and just, it's an interesting one to see the light go on when you've got a group of kids that you're talking to, and this is interesting. It's just a presentation for a lot of them. And then all of a sudden you'll see one or two kids that are just, their eyes are lit up and they're just glued to you. It's like, this is speaking to them. They're arty. They're those kids that maybe they're getting, struggling with math or whatever it is, because I can relate to that. But it's all of a sudden art is a way of communication. And a lot of what I do is starting off the foundational, just the basics of here's this. And I try and avoid that. What's intimidating about art is getting started. A lot of people don't even know where to start. So a lot of what I'll do is just, we can do this with the group here, is how many of you can draw a triangle? And I get a lot of people, hey, no problem, I can do that. Okay, how about a circle? You put those two things together and you've got the foundations for a grizzly bear painting. We'll turn that triangle into a mountain, we'll turn that circle into a bear, but it gives you that starting point. And that is one of those, there's one of those magical moments where you just see like, oh, I can draw, I can do this. So remove that intimidating part of it at that very beginning and then go from there.
I think that's so true. How many of you have trouble starting or are you procrastinators? Or then there's those of us who can get started and it's like, oh, I have to run off and do something else, so we forget to finish. So it all works together. And as we sit here, my friend Kurt started with a blank sheet of paper, and you're going to see later what he's done because he's always working on something. And we were talking earlier about an artist from before that John Haynes, he's 88 years old now, but he did our show years ago, and wherever he was sculpting. He always had a piece of clay or something in his hand. So I love seeing artists that you just can't help yourself. You've got to create, even if you're doing other things. So,
And I say that we could have Kurt run this whole meeting. I'd love listening to him. Like, I
fun.
can tell stories, but not like that.
I know.
Fantastic. Can you talk and draw at the same time?
How many years? 23? 23.
Oh.
Would you believe when he first started, he could barely talk to people?
That is correct. And I was terrified of people. I grew up with horses and not people. And in the horse business, people weren't honest with you, but a horse never lied to me. So I was always out and around corrals with these horses. And that's where, when we came in, and I'll tell you, this is the absolute truth. Susan does a Friday meeting. When I first started, for years, and I still come to them. This year it's been a little spottier for some reasons, but I try to get to these meetings because she told me what to say. How do you talk to people? Because when Wendy and I got married, for the first 20 years of my career, I couldn't talk to anybody. And
Can you believe that?
people would walk up and I would start to sweat. And that's never a good look. So because of what I learned here, and I'll never forget, there was a guy that he and his wife were in the show, and they've been in the show a long time when I got here. He came up to me one day and he says to me, and I had put my pedestal in the back corner of the booth where I didn't have to look at anybody and my back was to them. So if Wendy would run interference, and then if they needed to hear the story, she would bring me in. And he told me, he said, if you don't come out here and you don't start talking to people, you're not going to sell anything, you're not going to say anything, you're not going to be back. You need to be out doing this. And so I had to learn. And this show was a big part of that. For years, Wendy ran interference, and then it finally got easier to where I didn't have that fear. But to this day, I can get really terrified. And so and I'll tell you what I learned was, for all of you guys, is that when people come up, and it's really fun to be able to talk to everybody. It's really fun to make really stupid comments, get everybody to laugh. It's really fun to have this interaction. But it took me a long time.
The definition of fear can either be false evidence appearing real,
That's right.
or face everything and rise.
Yeah.
So, and it's so fun to see that evolution. And what happened is the true, authentic Kurt Mattson came out, just like each one of you. And I think the joy that we all experience here is that true, authentic connection with human beings, and the artist stepping into their unique qualities and being willing to share it with others, and for all of you to come here interested to learn and experience it. So that we thank you for that. And we're glad that you came out of your shell.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, oh, good grief, I'm talking so much, they're just saying, I'll do anything to make it stop, So,
You do know when to listen to.
well, I
do know
can
that.
try to, that's for darn sure,
Yeah,
I think you teach without the feeling that you're being taught. You have been great to talk to during the show and give advice. And I never walk away thinking, okay, that was somebody, teaching me how to do this. It's like you rope people in, your stories are just magical. And I think that's part of it when you are just, again, continuing your stories with your art. It's just like you're roped into these stories. Like, I feel like I know so much more about horses just being around you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. But I think all of us, I think that's a great point, Trevor. Because ultimately we find our voice by the passions that we have. And you find your audience by those same things. And the way the people that, they'll go over to Trevor or to Kathy, they may look at me and say, who's that guy? But these guys, they really hook up with. And that's what's so great about art. And that's exactly right.
Speaks to you. And then, so Trevor, you work primarily, or what we sell here is primarily paintings.
Right.
And many of them on metal, which is a great combination, and they can be indoors and outdoors. But your paintings have a very drawn-like quality to them, the detail, and part of that is the brushes you use. And do you sketch out to begin with, or do you paint?
I do. I'm gonna put this down and walk around and demonstrate real quick.
I'll use my theater voice. So really, I come, again, talking about my background, I don't really come from like a formal training. I get,
your mic holder.
okay.
I got straight C's in all my art classes.
Perfect.
So I ended up quitting school. I never graduated because it was just killing my GPA. I was like, forget it, I'll come back. But really what it comes down to is I almost know like a shorthand of drawing to communicate, because I consider myself more of a colorist than anything else. I tell stories through color. Black and white is there, and it's a means to an end. But this one was actually haunting to my son-in-law when they came to the studio. But again, it's just a real basic feel for what it is. Again, this is one of my metal pieces. But this whole story was some of our horses that live up in the Salt River up here, the wild horses. Everything about this, they can really see it very clearly. There's a baby in between the two. They were carefully walking along, going through the kind of the rough edges where there's lots of rocks. They were carefully stepping their way through the edge of the river. But just something about that. But this is all that I'll do really as far as the drawing. It's enough for me to start taking those cues of where things are going to go.
Is that white charcoal?
Just a white pencil, colored pencil. It shows up better on the metal than a regular pencil. But it really isn't. They're almost ghostly. It's like a lot of the things they do when it first comes together, it's like it looks like ghosts, but it's also after 35 years of doing this, it is like a shorthand because I know exactly where things are going to go. I know where the color is. I'll make little notes here and there. And if these had some props, you realize.
We like props.
So this was actually a commission piece. I don't know if you guys can see this at all. Beth can zoom in. But I do get a little bit more detail than some of the sketches that do. And here again is what I'm trying to communicate to someone else, saying this is the colors that I'll use. This is where it's going to go. Because a lot of what happens is I see it for the colors. I see it for the pieces. We use this as a tool before we go forwards to say was a commission piece. Here's what it's going to look like. And here's some examples of color where it's going to go. But again, it's that rudimentary drawing of where things are going to be. And a lot of my trees are just, here's a tree, but this is what this looks like. And it's, again, it's that shorthand thing, but it all goes back to that foundational, you've got to have something to be able to visualize and then go from there.
Do you ever let people have the studies when they order a commission?
I do. Usually they're stained by coffee and paint, and because they're part of the process. So they're right there where I'm slinging paint all the way around. They're kind of gross at the end of the day. This one's actually relatively very clean.
It's still got time.
It still has time.
Okay, so pencils.
Yeah.
We know you're particular about paint brushes, so talk about your pencil.
This is, again, a little OCD. Number 2, Ticonderoga. The best is they're just reliable. I think I've used mechanical pencils, and it's one of those goofy things that I just will buy a big box of these. I know the eraser's good. This is kind of my, sickness that I have to have that exact same thing. And one of the things I'll do real quick, and I'll just show you, like we were talking about with the triangles and using your imagination.
Number 2 pencils for the win.
So this is what I'll go to a kindergarten say, and we're talking about getting started in the work. And my examples have always been, everybody can draw a triangle. So that's the beginning of where you're going to be. And it's like once you get through that next first step, now you've got a mountain scene. Maybe it doesn't look like what, but we're getting there. What we're going to move on is have a bear in front of this. So we're going to do an oval. It's like all of a sudden, that's again something that everybody can understand. But this is kind of where I would go to get them to go forwards and say, this can be something, anything you make it at this point. We can do whatever you want to do. So we could add another little circle. And all of a sudden, you've got ears, another circle here, and we're turning it into a bear. It looks very childlike, but it gets the point across. It gets to what they're going to, again, trying to get people off dead center and get away from a blank canvas so you get something you can relate to.
I love that because it is shapes, lines. It's a happy bear,
Happy Bear. Where's Bruce?
joyful, happy.
This is all how my school talks start, and then it gets really interesting from there because the kids like, oh, I can do this. And then it goes into chaos because they all get paper and they start going.
So you're helping really create that vision.
It's just facilitating that to get to that point and go forwards. But it is a lot of fun.
And what a gift, like empowering people to visualize what could be possible.
And it's fun for me to see just that little group of kids that are in this big mass that it just clicks. Like, okay, you're the future artist right here.
And we love that. And again, when you get to your paints, you have a very drawing-like quality.
Very much. And a lot of what I use is tiny little brushes. So I use some of the bigger ones, as it goes on, it's very blocky. As I go through the process, and each one has like 2 or 3 layers of paint on top. Again, it is almost that drawing. And when I demonstrate doing painting technique, I hold my paintbrushes just like I would hold a pencil, very close to the ferrule, very close to the thing. So I'm using just wrist motions, again, drawing motions to create that movement of hair to pull this way here. So it's not great sweeping gestures of like a big brush when you think of big flow. This is very much that detail technique of pull and then using darks and lights to create that feeling of where I want your eye to go, to create that fullness to it, and lights and shadows coming in that direction. So it's a lot like drawing with a paintbrush.
And again, how values play into that. So thank you. Do you want to talk a little bit about the concept of value?
I got my own thing.
Are you gonna stand up and dance around? Or
I didn't bring as many props as they did because I didn't bring a sketchbook with me, but I do a lot of my layout work in Photoshop. I guess I'm the new generation of doing a lot of my compositional elements and playing around with different elements and aspects by drawing in Procreate and Photoshop, which are both on like an iPad or a laptop computer. And I do photography as well. So oftentimes I'm basing my work on reference photos that I've taken in different places, which I suspect. Kurt, you work from reference photos as well, or most? Oh, yeah. So a lot of times I will go into Photoshop and change the light source and mess around with decreasing and increasing values and contrast and that kind of thing. And then from that, it's once I figure out my layout, that's when I start doing more of my sketching. But the great thing about digital programs is you can do in a thumbnail as well, as I can say, oh, let's try Troya over here. Oh no, I need a couple inches over because it's now right behind my Roadrunner's head or whatnot. I know this isn't about values per se, but kind of about my artistic drawing process. And so once I have that layout, that's when I start doing my sketching and figuring out exactly where I want things positioned to be and getting the proportions correct and making sure that I'm happy with it. And I do that on regular white paper. I don't sketch directly onto the scratch board itself. I have various pads of paper, just like they're working on in different sizes. And so I get a really accurate line drawing done on that. And then I use a white transfer paper to get the drawing onto the board itself. But because my work, the color is done on Scratchboard over the top of the black and white scratching. So even if I was going to color this mountain lion, I would still have to bring it to a black and white image first. And the values are imperative because if the values are off, then I'm going to have to do a lot more work with the color side of it as well. But just like Kurt talked about, I don't remember why I don't know why certain things stick out in my head from, elementary school, junior high. But I had an art teacher in junior high or high school that told me, save your darkest darks and your brightest brights for where you want the viewer's eye to go. And for some reason, that's always stuck in my head because that's what brings our attention is those sharp lines and dark darks and bright brights. So you'll see like my mountain lion where I faded his body out and really your focus comes up to the catchlight in his eye because that's the brightest bright. And then these dark darks kind of fade out because so much of the work is dark, but using the values to really give dimensionality to the piece. And even the chickens that are sitting right behind Susan here, where do your eyes go? They go right to the eyes of the animals and their funny expressions with the bright beaks and whatnot. So values are absolutely incredibly important, not only to creating compositional elements, but also creating depth within a work. So if everything is flat and kind of all the same value, it is less appealing to us to look at, but second of all, it just doesn't read correctly. So a lot of times I have students, I like Trevor I teach workshops in Scratchboard, and students will come to me and say, oh, well, it just doesn't look right. And I'll help them see, oh, the values are actually what's wrong, not the drawing or not the composition. It's that the values are not correct within the work and we need to punch them up or knock this area back down or whatever and all of a sudden it looks right. And it's amazing how just a little minor change sometimes can go from being like blah to like, wow, that's amazing.
Before I forget. So you're doing all your sketching and you put it on transfer paper. Is that when you decide how big you want each piece to be? Because I know what has always impressed me is how effective your small pieces are and how effective your big pieces are. This is a little bit more about your technique, but I've always wanted to know how you decide that.
I usually decide that right off the get-go.
Okay.
Yeah, so usually those references. So I'm kind of atypical in the Scratchboard world because most Scratchboard artists really like working little because it's a very time-consuming medium, and to them it looks like it's a lot less work if you're only having to cover a board 5x7 or 8x10. But and I started out with that perspective as well, and now many of my works are larger pieces, and I love the impact that a larger work can have, but it's more storage space and it is more time commitment, but not always is it exactly a relative time commitment, which I think a lot of artists could probably say this, that a piece that's a quarter the size doesn't take a quarter of the time. So a small piece for me, I use much smaller scratches to create that because I like my work to look very believable, and that really, many of you have been through my booth. I have magnifying glasses. You can look at it with a magnifying glass and still go, wow, that really looks like fur. Well, if I did a little tiny cat and the nose hair was like this long, that wouldn't look like fur relative to that animal. It would look too long. So the scratches on a little tiny board have to be, the size of a pinprick almost to look like a believable texture for that particular size of board. So sometimes a little board can take me almost as long as doing a bigger board because I can use larger, kind of more freehand scratches and kind of a more natural length of scratch for a larger piece.
You bring up something really important there, Kathy, too, talking about values. There's that old saying, that color gets all the credit, but value does all the work. And that idea of values, I'll show you. This is,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
We can
The
see that.
reason this is important is, well, John Noon is like, he's really kind of disgusting because he's so stinking talented and he's not that old. So
Jonathan Moon, the young
Yeah.
gun in the.
he is just fantastic. Now, this is a drawing in progress. Yeah, oh, sure. Oh, maybe we can split it or something. There we go. So we'll do it like that. But when you start talking about value, not only does he get the drawing correct, so as you look, and that's there's a perspective things going on here that are difficult to draw. John really nails it, but then look at how, and he's got probably another week in this thing, and he's already got a week on it right now. But see how those values are? It directs the eye because it goes, Kathy said it exactly right. Lightest lights, darkest dark, center of interest. And that transcends medium because you want to have primary, secondary, tertiary areas so that every time you view that work, it's interesting. And with drawing, you only got the values to do that. And you can see John's taking you on an adventure. And this is a really great example of good academic drawing. Being able to put this stuff out. You can do this well with black and white. You're well ready to start in terms of color. For years, a lot of people, that's all they do is work in black and white. Because the value is that important. So this is really, and here again, this is in progress. So maybe in a week, you can go over and see John and see the finished product. But this is what really good drawing in terms of in process, what it looks like. And you can see him directing your eye all through that particular drawing. Really important stuff there. And this is charcoal, is correct. And that is not an easy medium. I got it. Yep.
It is amazing how, looking at that and your sepia tone drawing over there, Kurt, and this mountain line, it's hard to believe it literally is just black and white, but you take more away like on the jowl and you leave more on the little.
Correct. So Scratchboard, the black and white layer of scratching is predominantly, it's a visual aspect of how much of the black ink is scratched away. So if I do multiple layers of scratching over and over and over the same area, you're seeing less and less of the black ink that was on the original board. So the value visually appears to be white because you're seeing more and more of the white layer that's underneath is coming up through there. So essentially all of this is essentially just black and white scratching, but I do occasionally come in and put like a shade of gray ink over things. So I did actually tone the body so that you're not seeing the bright white scratches of that initial layer, but instead kind of a subtler scratch with a shade of gray that's been put back over the top of it, which is essentially how I work the color pieces as well. The color is put over the top of the black and white scratching and worked in multiple layers. So dark color first, and then I do another layer of scratching to bring the midtones and highlights back up. And then another wash of ink back over the top of that, colored ink back over the top of that, and then another layer of scratching. So it's kind of multiple layers. Somebody came into my booth, maybe it was somebody here in the audience that said, "So show me somewhere on my sign that said I could scratch and color it up to 10 times. And I said, show me somewhere on here that you scratched and colored 10 times. And I said, well, I don't know. That's a board that's not going very well because I just keep working it, re-scratching it, recoloring it until I get it looking the way that I want it to look. So it's not really a formulaic that, oh, this particular area is going to take 4 layers of scratching and coloring, and this one's going to take 7. It's just kind of like, well, does that look good? Nope, not there yet. Do another layer of scratching, another layer of coloring.
But you can't erase.
So it's not as forgiving as oils or acrylics, but I can come back in and put dark ink back over things and then rework it. So while it is an actual engraving process, so if I painted a tree, or I mean, if I scratched out a tree and then went, oh man, it's coming right out of the middle of his forehead and I didn't notice, unlike a painter who could just go like, oh, well, let's just paint that out of there. I would have to incorporate something else into the board because you would see indentations from where the tree was at. But I could put something else in there or remove the whole background back out of there. So it's not completely that you can't make changes and alterations to it. That's kind of the misnomer that comes from our grade school scratch board on cardboard that is not really allow you to make changes. But because of the product I work on is a clay base, it's much harder. I can continually add and take away, as I said, multiple times to rework an area or adjust the values as I'm going along. So it's not a medium. A lot of people come in the workshops and say, oh, I tried this in school and I made a mistake and I just had to throw the whole thing away. But professional scratch board is actually much more forgiving than that, and you can make alterations to it.
How many of you did scratch board when you were kids? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So Kurt, you also do
Dry planes.
dry point.
Yes.
They're super cool. You want me to hold that? Oh,
Yeah, I'll just put it down here. Does everybody know what a dry point is? Okay, let me get this. This is what a dry point is. Think about etchings. Etchings are where you draw on a metal plate and then dip it in acids, and it gets deeper and deeper, and you manage your darks and lights through it, and then you run it through, you ink it, put it through a press, and then you end up with an etching. Now, etchings, you can do as many as you want. A dry point is different. You use a plate, like here's a dry, let me get up here. This is a dry point plate, okay? And you use it for etching too. This is nickel. But instead of, because of acids, and my dad, when I was little, before we got in the horse business, he had a radiator shop and it was full of acid. I've got this thing about acids and it's just awful stuff. So I don't want anything to do with it. And so what you do is you draw on here with a metal scribe, and I have a couple of different kinds that I like.
pass this around in a minute.
Yeah, you can, and they'll pass around so you can see it. And you'll see the image here, okay? Then once I get it done, then I ink it, wipe all the ink off, and the ink will stay in the low parts. The burr is what holds the ink, the burr that you make when you're drawing on the plate. Then I run it through a press. I have a really cool etching press, and you make a print. And with a dry point, you can only make about 20 because if you go past that, the image will degrade. So dry points are so cool. And here again, now this is just part of cowboy art history. Hardly anybody's doing them anymore. Like Maureen got really well known for his etchings, but hardly anybody does them anymore. There's me and 2 other guys that I know of that are doing them. Dry points in particular there's just not many of us doing this stuff. But what it does is it lets you, is a part of cowboy art history. And this is a real affordable way of being able, because each print is an original. And no matter how much I wipe the ink off and it looks like it's just like the last one, and I run it through the press and it looks entirely different. And so each one is an original. And so it's a great way of telling little cowboy stories that's more affordable. So you've kind of got, and plus, again, for me, the big thing is it's cowboy art history. If you go back to guys like Bourdain, you go back, even Joe Beaver, some of these guys, yeah, he would do etchings. He did etchings as opposed to dry points, but you know, they had something for everybody. And you don't find a genre where you have that as common and then you do with cowboy art. So I do them because it's just part of being, if you're gonna be a cowboy artist, well, don't be monkeying around about it. You know, learn all this stuff and do the best you can with it. And so when you see these guys, and these are these are 4x6s. I got a little Buckaroo Bronc here and I got a little Vaquero with his Rayetta out here. It's called Rayetta Man. Each one of those is so much. Now remember, you have to draw them backwards because it's going to be, of course, you know, it's going to be reversed. So you have to think about, okay, there's Latigo on this side. I'm on the right side. I got to make all my ropers left-handed, which for me is great being left-handed, but you have to make all of your ropers left-handed because they're going to be right-handed in your print. All of these things have to come into the making of that piece so that it's accurate. And then, like I say, each one of them will be unique. So there's a whole lot to it. I'm going to pass this guy around. Take your time, have a look at it, and you can see the image there and the plate and stuff and kind of what it takes. But they are really cool. And again, it's something that's unique, kind of unique to cowboy art that you don't see a lot of. And so it's a great way to get an original and have something that is really based in drawing, because you got to be able to draw to do that.
Was it more like the Charlie Russell and the Remingtons that did a lot of etchings, or was it?
Yeah, they did drawings like Charlie.
So,
Yeah, the pen and inks he did,
right.
they were fantastic. When you get to guys like Green and in that era, like towards the end of Russell's era, the etchings began to be a dominant. You start to see more of them, and then it's kind of continued. But there's, like I say, there's hardly anybody doing it. But like Russell, nobody did a pen and ink like Russell. Just nobody. But when you look at, if you get a chance to look at Edward Bourdain's ink drawings and the etchings and his pen drawings, they're just fantastic. And that's all a part of that tradition. And for me, because growing up in California, growing up with the Vaquero and all the Buckaroo stuff, it's like, boy, howdy, this is right where you need to be, you know? So that's part of the deal.
Well, one was the inks too were done in the field as they're doing something. It's like, well, I'll remember this day and share this with my friends. So it's like, it wasn't really so much they were doing that to sell so much as just because this was they were driven. It was this day. He was just beautiful.
That was a reference.
History, yeah,
Yeah.
reference, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a bunch of different drawings from Bourdain that are from 1890s. And he was still a vaquero when he did these. So he's working down in old Mexico and he's drawing these things right there. He's stepping off a horse and drawing stuff. And those things are just, you know, a lot of them look at people and look, oh, the drawing isn't that great. But they're pieces of his history. And then that was part of his growth as an artist. And he's recording what the real vaquero was doing at that period of time. So they're extremely valuable in terms of that. So.
And also one of our, the Eddie Baschet collection, which has now been donated to the Western Spirit Museum of the West in Scottsdale. They're starting to reveal a little bit at a time, but one of the things that struck me the first time I saw the Baschet collection down in Chandler at their old corporate office was the Joe Bealers. And Eddie Baschet was one of the biggest supporters of the Cowboy Artists of America early on and built a huge, perhaps the largest cowboy art collection of the time.
Yeah, oh, I think that's right. No, he's got the largest collection of Bealers of anybody in the world.
Yeah.
And it's not far behind in terms of turfing. So.
And Bealer was like you, he did sculpture, he did painting, he did drawing, but partnered with most of his display would be a thank you note from Joe Bealer, always with a little drawing.
Yep, little watercolor.
Yep.
That's just great. That's just great.
So it's going to be fun to see all that display, and it's a great museum.
Yeah.
I just popped in there on Tuesday the other day. But the other thing, do you draw the foundation of this painting, or is it once you have a concept, you just throw the paint on the canvas?
Yeah, I'll draw everything out, make sure it's correct, and then start to work, you know, bring it up. That drawing, because if the drawing isn't right, I don't care what you do. It's no different in sculpture. If you get stuff off, I don't care, because I tell everybody, and you guys have been over at the booth, that if it's ugly in bronze, it's ugly for a long time. So we don't want to see that. So you make sure that things are correct. And, this paintings are going to be around a long time. And you owe it to the collector that they're the best you can do and that they're dead on. And that drawing is the foundation of it all. If that drawing's off, you can put all the pretty colors in the world on it and it's still gonna look wonky.
So how does it compare with your drawing on the paintings is your drawing of your sculpture? And I've seen some of those, what you're doing, getting ready for sculpting.
Yeah, I don't draw anything that I'm gonna sculpt. I never draw it. Because here's what happens. Now, this is me. I've seen it with other sculptors and whenever you sculpt something, you have got to be willing to break bones or it won't read. If you don't know your anatomy well enough to exaggerate to that point, it will not have any life and it will be stiff. So I get it in, get it laid out, and then just start bending stuff. And, and whatever, and if you're doing it right, and the guys that know, there was a sculptor named Fritz White, and Fritz could do this, he would break more bones than you could shake a stick at. And if you knew it, it was there, but you didn't care because it was so right on. So that's why I don't draw those things out.
That's it. Okay.
And you're sculpting in 3D. So you have to think 3D in that
Yep.
realm, yeah.
Yep.
It's kind of like the Enforcer.
Well, I didn't think about that. That's a whole new thing, Susan.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
yes.
better sit up in that saddle there, buddy. You really, the fluidity in your bronzes is, you feel that you've captured the proper proportions and, we know you get the history right, but
All that stuff's really critical, and it's true with your drawing. It's like if Trevor draws or Kathy, it's like, look at that cougar. That cougar is so well drawn. There's nothing going wonky on that baby. Because she knows how to draw. And and I'll tell you now, you guys probably have this experience where a collector will say, I bought this piece 15 years ago. I knew there was something wrong with it, but I just kind of liked it. And now they just can't hardly stand it because there's stuff that's wrong and their eye has to. It's not going to happen with this.
I just wanted to point out that a lot of art is a seeing skill more than what we do with our hands. It's learning to perceive and learning to see and learning how, and that translates to no matter what medium. So your drawing skills that Kurt has developed by his sketching and sketching and sketching and sketching and sketching undoubtedly made you a better sculptor as well, because it's a matter of looking at things and seeing them and then being able to translate it into your artwork. And I've been a pencil artist, scratchboard artist for most of my life, but I went and decided, hey, I should learn how to do some oil painting. And so I went and did some oil paintings and really when I made myself go to an art class because I just wasn't dedicating the time to it because I had lots of scratchboards and deadlines and this and that and the other. So I said, I live in Denver. I'm going to go to the Denver Art Student League and go take a class in oil painting just because it gave me a focused time period that I would work on oil paintings only. And because I had the class every week, it would make me focus on them and give the amount of time to them and the instructor didn't know me from Adam. And by my second oil painting, he kind of was like, holy cow, because the seeing skills that I developed with drawing translated very quickly to another medium. And I admit I haven't done a lot of 3D stuff, but I actually would like to try it sometime when I have an actual studio with room to actually do it. But I can pick up a pastel, I can pick up oil painting, I can pick up acrylics, etc. Not because I have the skill set to learn, I might be slow at them, but because I see the same way that I do as a scratchboard artist in those skills that I've developed of seeing.
And that's really important because you're exactly right. Everything makes the other better. And that idea of being able to see, and you develop it as a collector, you develop it as an artist, to see everything. Because again, a good piece of art is going to take you on an adventure. Primary, secondary, tertiary areas. It's never going to get old. And that's where all of this skill set, like Kathy's talking about, is so critical to be able to grab onto these things.
I really like that seeing skill.
And I like to I don't do as many, works with students maybe as Trevor does, but I work with a lot of adults. And I like to say that my favorite people to come to my workshops are people who do not believe that they can do art. How many of you think you can't draw a stick figure? How many bodies of stick, how many of you can draw the body of a stick figure? Okay, how many of you can draw the body of a stick figure? I think every person here can. That's the foundation of drawing. Most of us establish our division in our minds of whether we can do art or not when we're about between 6 and 8 years old. And we never go beyond that. We decided at 6 years old, I can't draw. And I encourage all of you as adults, if you have a passion to learn to become an artist, go take an art class, because we see things differently as a 6-year-old than we do as an adult. We can take critiques, we can take information now that we couldn't take at 6 or 7 or 8, and you can learn to draw. And you can learn to become an artist. I mean, you may not be here as a celebration of fine art, but you can learn to create work that exceeds what the expectation that you have in your head is of what you can do with art. So Trevor works with kids because they're a lot more open to learning skills. Adults come in with this pre-thought of like, I can't draw, I can't do anything. But if you can draw this, if you can draw a stick figure, the body of a stick figure, that is the foundation of drawing, is a straight line, it's a circle, it's a triangle, like Trevor said.
And if it's a sip and paint class, I have found so many people come back in, they did whatever a class was, to just get a touch of, oh, this is what it's like to paint, this is what it's like to draw, here's the material, somebody will lead you along and open your eyes to seeing around you, recognizing it, observing it, and then trying to translate it. You see the world a little differently all of a sudden when you're going to try and say, okay, how would I interpret this? How would I interpret this sunset? How would I convey this sunset if I'm trying to tell somebody? Those are one of my favorite stories. We went to a class where I watched a Bob Ross and I tried it. It opened your eyes to what it is we do all the time. We have to do for a living. Just to have that touch of magic that's out there, that creativity.
That is very true. And it's, there's something empowering about it. Like I remember many, many years ago, Jerry Jordan and Ron Cheek, 2 impressionist artists that were in the show, and they said, you want to have a painting lesson? I'm like, sure. And I stood there with all this paint and the canvas, and I was like, but it was really fun. Like when you just go for it and do it with a pencil or a scratch board or a pen.
Learning from somebody that is an experienced person, and not all artists are good teachers, just like any art, any passion, not everybody is a great teacher, but if you can find somebody that can, and sometimes they might be a great teacher for one person, a terrible teacher for another person, just because you don't click with the person or they explain it in a way that just doesn't make sense to you. And then you go to somebody else who says really the same thing, but in a different way. And it just clicks inside of you. But as I said, my favorite people to teach are people that think they can't draw, because when you have good instruction and you have somebody helping you and saying, oh, look at the value here versus here, and you need to do this to adjust it, and look at the shape of this form and whatever, somebody that's really kind of over your shoulder giving you good instruction, you can really improve in a great way, partly because you're open to learning in a way that you weren't as a child. You couldn't see those value differences. And I say, oh, look, it's darker here than it was there. To a 6-year-old, they want instant results, and they want it to look perfect right off the get-go. And I don't know, I'm not a musician, but I'm the type that if I wanted to go learn to play piano, I want it instantly. I don't want to spend years learning how to do it. But like any skill, drawing, art, whatever, it is something that does take some time to learn, but you really can exceed your own expectations.
Yeah, we all like that instant gratification.
Yeah.
So I want to share, how long have you been drawing and stuff?
Well, what did I say? I don't even know. It's been probably 20 years or so.
So you've been here 23.
I've been 23. So let's say 17.
But he just recently discovered the power of the fine point. So he was in the office one day and Joanne said, try this. And you drew some sketches. Do you want to show what
Yep.
you've done while you've been here?
See,
If you
this
don't
is-
own a fine point Sharpie yet, you need to get one they create.
And see, these are all gesture sketches. You do them out of your head. You really learn how to position a horse to do anything. Your riders, and there's some basic things you can look at, but ultimately you want to have these things. I do a page of these at least every day. And because again,
If you want to get good at something,
yeah, And Ed Boreen, he did that, and Ed's my hero in terms of the art, so it's like, oh, good grief. And he had such a voice, and so this develops all of that. So you can put a horse, lock in horses, he could be trotting, he could be doing anything. But get him in position and put him up there and just, again, line quality and simplicity. Think about the gesture you're making and making a simple statement, because all great art comes down to simple statements. And don't overdo it, but get the gesture. And these are what I call gesture drawing. And I try to get everything perfect. They get the gesture in. And I just do page after page of these things. And so each one of them is a different quality. One thing that's interesting with this little Sharpie, I usually use pen and ink with nibs and stuff, and you get a whole different line quality with it. You can just turn it a little bit, press a little harder or whatever you're doing. And with this one, there's a different way of being able to get some line quality out of it. So I'm still kind of practicing with it, but it's really fun. So just get a Sharpie. On Instagram, sometimes I'll take it when I'm in the studio. I'll slap my board up there, put a big piece of paper and get, those great big jumbo Sharpies and just start drawing them in jumbo Sharpies. Everybody loves that, but here's what jumbo Sharpie does. Jumbo Sharpie makes you simplify, because that line, and the other thing, see, with ink, you can't, once it's down, you're stuck with it. So you start to think, okay, that line's important, that line's important, that line's important, that line's important. And so you start to think that way, and you end up with these wonderful little gestures. And you can make really simple drawings from that.
And you're not just doing one continuous line, you're doing lots of little.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. I just start putting stuff down. And sometimes you just go, what have I done? And you begin to weep incessantly. Other times you go, wow. And you know what happens? There usually will be one or two on there, and you go, oh, that's a little gem. There's another one not so much, but that one. And this is where you get more consistency in your drawings.
So this session has been brought to you by Sharpie and the number 2, Ronda, yeah. I love a number 2 pencil, and I love Sharpie, and I have highlighters of every color. So there is an artist inside me. And well, so they have to do something for it then. Oh, Kathy has a dozen samples of a scratch board. So if you want one, we're gonna make you do something. They have to commit to drawing at least a stick figure. I don't know, but any questions before we wrap up? This is fascinating. Yes, Ned. Here.
Sorry.
It's not that I've been known to be quiet, but this question about gestures, we haven't spent much time on that middle figure up there. And I've been looking at this thing the whole time and talking about gestures. It's like they're all having a conversation and the guy on the left doesn't know what's going on.
There's a whole lot going on in that.
I mean, that chicken is clueless. The one in the front is
Nobody told me about that.
one in the front is running his show. The guy between them, he's well, or she is saying, "Well, I don't get this either." But the one on the left is totally it. So it's a whimsical piece. Is this intentional like that? I mean, because it's a terrific whimsical piece.
Yes,
And I can assign human personalities to each one of those chickens.
so.
I'm the guy on the left, by the way.
Guy on the left, okay. So I love whimsical art. It's some of my favorite is artwork that makes people smile, makes them laugh, makes them go, oh, that's really funny. But I also want it to be kind of realistic to nature in a way. So I don't do stuff that's necessarily like, well, actually I do stuff like Kurt as an ostrich, but
It was awesome. It was so good. I've never been an ostrich in my whole life.
so I chose a bunch of reference photos of chickens with attitude, but I didn't want them all to have the same personality. I wanted them to each have their own unique personalities. And so everybody relates to a different chicken. And while I was working on this piece, I would ask people, which is your inner spirit chicken? And and I would also ask men, which of these is your type of chick? So I like to make people laugh in general. We have a lot of serious stuff going on in our world at pretty much all times. And so I like artwork that people can feel a little bit lighthearted about. A lot of people like this rightmost chicken who has a lot of attitude and she's kind of glaring at you. And as I was working on it, people would come through and go, oh, that reminds me of my friend such and such. And they would point at different chickens. And so each one kind of, we all know friends that we can assign to each of those individual chickens. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say the title on the news. So it's We Don't Give a Cluck is the title of the artwork. And I like funny titles as well. So that's part of the humor that goes with my work. And yep, they do have each kind of their own unique personality. And maybe, you identify with the rightmost, somebody else probably identifies with a different chicken that's in there.
And every year we have a thing here where the artists pick one artist that they're going to create, paint, sculpt, whatever. And how many people are doing it this year? 15? I don't know. So were you last year? So Kurt was last year, and every year Kathy paints or draws or scratches the artist as a animal. So he was an ostrich.
John Linton was the goat. Gideon was a Cape buffalo, and Tony Barbineau was a chimpanzee.
Yeah. So this year, the selected artist that they are featuring is Shannon Lee.
And I never reveal what animal I'm doing until I
So-
reveal it to the artist when the artwork is finished. But you'll have to come back past my booth sometime in the next, it'll probably be done in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
I'm working
so-
on it at home. I don't work on it here at the show so that nobody knows what it is. So you're welcome to come by and guess what kind of
You guess,
animal
okay.
Shannon is, but I will not tell you. If you guess correctly, I will confirm it with you.
And then we'll have all those exhibited in the cafe near the last couple weeks of the show. And it's kind of fun to see how different artists interpret one specific subject matter. So super fun. Other questions before we wrap up? Yes. Can you hand her the mic?
It's less a question and more a comment. I've always thought that doing artwork, whether you're drawing or painting or whatever, is that you start with something in your hand and you do it. But you emphasized today something I never thought of before, that first you have to really, really see it. It's the seeing. It never dawned on me that not like picturing it kind of, but like really seeing it. So that was an interesting insight for me. So thank you.
Very much, yeah. It all begins with a vision, right? So good. Well, this has been fun. I've enjoyed learning from our crew today and sharing with you. So Trevor is located on the south tent near the McDowell Mountains end. Okay. Kathy Sheeter is in the corner because we've got to keep an eye on her to over here next to John Linton, and Kurt Mattson is on the north tent, 2 rows up, I think, from the corner. Yeah, just right over there. So we invite you to stroll around, look at their work, come up closer here to look, check online. We've got some great videos actually of all these people online and on our website you can check out. But thank you so much, Kurt, Kathy, Trevor, and company.
Yeah.
See you next week.
And if you would like a sample scratch board, the first however many I have people that come up here and claim one, will get one to take home.